you enter the workforce, you will find competition from those crossing our all too porous borders. Now, I know you're all going to say, Stephen, immigrants built America. Yes, but here's the thing. It's built now. I think it was finished in the mid-'70s sometime. It's just, at this point, it's a touch-up and repair job.
Stephen Colbert with words of wisdom for the graduating class of Knox College circa 2006. Charles Wheelan, senior lecturer in public policy at the University of Chicago, had his own commencement address in this weekend's Wall Street Journal. Fantastic piece, 10 things your commencement speaker won't tell you. You got a book coming out as well, Charles. Thank you very much for joining us. This was a very funny piece and very observant, I should add.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the piece. It was based on a real speech that I gave last year at about this time.
Right, and were you the commencement speaker? You said it was at Dartmouth. Were you the commencement speaker that year, or was it for a different speech that time of year?
It's interesting. The commencement speaker was Conan O'Brien on Sunday. I was the warm-up act as an alumnus and a faculty member because I teach there during the summer. I was invited to give the Saturday address to just the students, so it's a smaller, more intimate affair. But most important, I had been a student at Dartmouth 23 years earlier, so I had sat where they sat. And as I got ready for the speech, I thought, you know, what do I wish that somebody had told me? Not what are they going to tell me, but what did I really need to hear?
Right. And I think this is good old homespun common sense and wisdom. And some of it, quite funny here, point two, some of your worst days lie ahead, which should be obvious to anybody who's graduating from college. Because, I mean, the reality is, if you're not having a pretty good time at college and you're not learning and the world's not your oyster then, unlikely when you're 45 and have a bunch of kids that the world's going to be your oyster then.
I think it's particularly true for people who are graduating into this economy. I think you got to let folks know that, look, in the end, if you work hard, you're probably going to come out better on the other side. But I think if you fluff people up on commencement day and say, look, you're going to walk out of here and everything's going to be roses, then when reality smacks you in the head, it's going to be that much worse.
Now, what did you sense, though, Charles? I sense I'm here. My guess is I'm plus or minus your age. And I sit here at the Wall Street Journal with a lot of folks who are younger than me, certainly folks who've graduated in the last few years. And I get a sense that while your wisdom is timeless, they see the world differently than I do. Is that the generation gap?
I think there's less of a generation gap than you might think. I think there are things that that generation has gone through. And in fact, one of the points in the piece in the book is help stop the Little League arms race, because certainly this generation compared to ours has made a competition out of everything. You can't just play soccer or just do debate. It's got to be supercharged. But I think when you get right down to it, a lot of what was in the speech was based on my conversations with students who are yearning for something bigger and deeper. So I think a lot of the advice that was applicable to our generation is still applicable to those folks, even if their experiences may have been radically different.
But what did you say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the younger generation, when you and I were growing up, I think the role of parents in society was viewed a little differently than it is today, or am I missing something?
No, I think you're right. I think it's one of the things that we tried to capture in the book, is this idea that the current generation coming through have been programmed to a much greater extent. The parents have a deeper involvement in every aspect of their lives, including their college work. I have students come in and they say, boy, I was talking about this paper with my father last night, and I'm thinking, all right, my father knew I was at Dartmouth. That's about it. I mean, he certainly didn't know what classes I was in, let alone what papers I was writing. So it is a different experience. But the things I try and capture in the book and the things people think about at commencement are much more timeless. What do you want to do with your life? What's going to be hard? What's going to be easy? Who's going to be your soulmate? And I don't think those things change that much over time.
Look, I agree, Charles, and I will be out there buying the book, largely because I think so much of your wisdom out here is beautiful, especially point number 9, which is one of my favorite points. It's one I try and explain to my children, even though they're not listening to me. It's all borrowed time. How often are people told that and they don't really get it, do they?
You know, when I gave the original speech at Dartmouth, I almost choked up because there were 2 salient facts, one of which I couldn't even bring myself to tell them about. The first was the speaker from my class, the person elected to give the speech, was our class president, Rhodes Scholar, somebody I had even dated a couple times, and she died of a rare cancer before our 10th reunion. And that I did tell the group, because I said that, you know, of all the people in our class who showed extraordinary promise, it was she who was most likely to change the world. And, you know, she's not here with us. So that was a very personal, poignant point that I tried to get across to these folks. But I think you, I, they all seem to think that, you know, we've got infinite time, and we don't.
Right. As my grandmother used to say, you know, this is it. It isn't a dress rehearsal. And while it's true, most commencement speakers do get that across, very often their people aren't listening. Was your sense that the students were listening to you? Did they hear what you had to say when you were there?
I think they did, in part because one of the things that came through in the speech in the book, which you may or may not pick up from the shorter piece, is I really tried to drill down on real people. So one of the points is your worst days lie ahead. I mean, that was one of the points I tried to make in the speech, which is a bit jarring to them. But I used a story that's true. My roommate from college was a very capable guy, wanted to be a Wall Street banker, interviewed all senior year, couldn't get a job, interviewed all summer after he graduated, couldn't get a job. By fall, he was living with his mother in San Francisco. Right. I passed through, and he said, look, I've got one job offer. I want to be on Wall Street. The only job offer I have is assistant food and beverage manager on the island of Saipan. Saipan is like 2 miles by 5 miles in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. You fly to Guam when you want a good time. And he's thinking, this is all I got.
This is it.
This was my roommate. This isn't some abstraction. So the students were really engaged. Where is this guy now? Well, what happened was that he was well suited for hospitality. Everyone who knew him thought that he should be there and not on Wall Street. And he went on to become the CEO of Rosewood Hotel.
There you go.
So he, in the process of going to Saipan, he really found out what he should be about.